Oh, hey. Oh, you seem a little wound up. Would you like to talk about it? Oh. Oh. God. Well, you know it could help with that. No. No, that definitely won't help. No. No, drawing. See, drawing can act as kind of a microcosm for how we should live our lives. There are so many lessons we can learn from drawing, and it doesn't matter what skill level you're at, or even whether or not you're an artist. Here are 4 basic lessons that drawing has to teach us. Are you ready? Well, let's begin! The first lesson that drawing can teach you is how to appreciate everything that's around you all the time. Beautiful stuff, ugly stuff, whatever, it doesn't matter. You know how whenever you're a kid and you're experiencing the world for the first time and like you go into a car and you can't even like reach the windows, you can't even look out of the windows. Everything is just like big and crazy and amazing, and the first time you see a sliding door, you're like, what? This is wild. So drawing sort of gets your brain back to that space. Whenever you're in the checkout line at Walmart and you're just kind of looking around and you're bored out of your mind and the person in front of you is just having so much trouble scanning that milk, then maybe you look at that person's hair. Or maybe you look at the wrinkles in their shirt, and instead of just focusing on how much time you're wasting, you're thinking, how might I depict that in an image? How might I draw that? You know what? If the wrinkles in that guy's shirt were drawn really well, then it could be a beautiful thing. Most people would just sit there and just look forward to the next thing that they have coming up. There's this really cool quote from the Dune series that I like a lot. It goes, "Knowing is a barrier to learning." I really like this because humans are pretty much engineered to categorize things and make things simpler and kind of sweep them aside so that they can continue to process new information all the time. And this is maybe great from like an evolutionary perspective, but in terms of living in the moment and just experiencing everything to its fullest potential, it is maybe not so great. One way we can get our brains into this everything is amazing kind of mindset whenever we're drawing is, this is going to sound really strange, but try drawing everything as if you're drawing a self-portrait. Whenever we're in drawing class, oftentimes one of the first assignments to do is to draw a self-portrait, and I think that's because teachers assume that people are going to want to portray themselves as best as they can. Makes it drawing immediately more personal whenever you're drawing a self-portrait, so it's harder to be like uncaring about the thing that you're drawing. And if we go back and like think about the whole Neil deGrasse Tyson, Carl Sagan, like Cosmos thing, like we're all made out of stardust, that whole thing, then in a sense, we are kind of part of more or less one big sort of entity. I know this is getting like really weird and spacey, but I really do think of it as we are all kind of facets of the universe looking back at itself. So in a way, everything really is kind of a self-portrait. And if we think about being on at least like an atomic level sort of related to everything, then it kind of makes every drawing you make a lot more personal. You might find some new subjects to draw, stuff that you wouldn't have previously thought of drawing, but now you're noticing all these new things, you're seeing this thing in a new light. Because this big sort of drawing everything as a self-portrait concept is sort of this big, heady mouthful, I like to refer to this concept as inanimate empathy. Number 2, don't focus so much on the small things. We all experience some anxieties to some degree. Some are obviously a lot worse than others. but whenever we zoom out and think about life as a whole and really how this small decision fits into other decisions, then we get a much better idea of how much importance to place on what things. I know that it is a kind of famous journaling technique to write down your anxieties each day and then go back, several months later, maybe a year later, at some of the things that were bothering you and really keeping you up at night, and think about them now and realize just how absolutely ridiculous that stuff was, and how a lot of this stuff was like totally inconsequential, and it did not affect you in the long term whatsoever, and it was pretty much just detracting from your life quality just because you were thinking about it all the time. Drawing is a really good way to remind ourselves of this principle. Whenever we start out drawing, we have to consider the composition first. We don't just start diving into the details, because then things aren't going to fit together. They're not going to be harmonious. It's not going to look right in context if we just focus on the nitty-gritty details. In the same way, we want to think about our decisions within the context of our day, within the context of our week, within our month, within our year. We also want to think about how each line is going to play into the overall picture we're drawing and how it fits in. Now, I'm not saying in either drawing or in life you should look super far ahead and try to work out every detail and visualize the whole picture all at once. What I'm saying is, in every decision that you make, you should keep kind of a zoomed out perspective and at least know the proper amount of focus that you should ration toward those decisions and how those lines and shapes play into your overall well-being. As cliche as it sounds, this is all more or less to say, don't sweat the small stuff. And if you're going to zoom in and kind of focus on a particular area, make it something that you enjoy, something that is good that you want to focus on and detail out. The third lesson we can learn from drawing is to embrace the journey. I've talked about this a little bit in a previous video, but this lesson is just all about living in the now and not looking too much forward. If we go back to our grocery store analogy and the person checking out milk, and man, that barcode has just rubbed off and they're not finding it anywhere and they're having such a hard time, and the lady at the self-checkout line is on the other side of the store and it's really bumming you out. In the same way that you want to look around for things to appreciate, you also just want to not look too ahead, not look forward to listening to your favorite song in the car or going home and petting your dogs or whatever. Those might all be great things, and sometimes it's nice to look forward to stuff every once in a while, but it's kind of the human condition to constantly be looking for the next thing. I mean, people are just never satisfied, and that is evolutionarily how we have wound up. And it's really important to kind of fight that urge, because if we just keep looking forward and looking forward and looking forward all the time, then what's there at the end? It's just nothing. It's nothing left. At the end there, we just die. In the same way, when we're drawing, if all we're doing is just looking forward to our drawing being done, then what even is the point of doing it if we're not enjoying ourselves a little bit and being creative and having fun? And look, these are things I have to remind myself too. There are times that I find myself switching to kind of autopilot, and then I look back at my drawing and then I realize that I just wasn't really thinking while I was drawing, and if I was thinking, then it would have come out better and I would have had more fun. I think this all really just comes from our obsession with time, and instead of worrying about how much time we're spending on things all the time, what we should be more concerned about is enjoying the time that we're spending. I believe I said this in the last video, that every time you draw a line, that's the only time you're ever going to draw that line in your entire life. And so why not just enjoy it and be there for it? It might sound kind of crazy to just enjoy the physical feeling of drawing a single line, but it's really possible. It can really be fun to just draw one line. There are a couple of really good quotes that I want to read that just do an excellent job of illustrating this point. This first quote is about the idea of eternal recurrence, and it comes to us from the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche.
What if someday or night a demon were to steal after you into your loneliest loneliness and say to you,
"This life as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live it once more, innumerable times more."
would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon who spoke thus? Or have you once experienced a tremendous moment when you would have answered him, "You are a god, and never have I heard of anything more divine"?
So, yeah, pretty fun quote. This is more or less how we should think about drawing and life in general. It kind of makes the idea of rushing through life just to get to the good bits kind of silly, kind of makes you want to slow down and, appreciate every moment to its fullest. This next quote is from this guy named Alan Watts. He's got a lot of cool lectures and stuff on YouTube. It is from his book called The Book on the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are.
As it is, we are merely bolting our lives, gulping down undigested experiences as fast as we can stuff them in, because awareness of our own existence is so superficial and so narrow that nothing seems to us more boring than simply being. If I ask you what you did, saw, heard, smelled, touched, and tasted yesterday, I am likely to get nothing more than the thin, sketchy outline of the few things that you noticed, and of those only what you thought worth remembering. Is it surprising that an existence so experienced seems so empty and bare that its hunger for an infinite future is insatiable? But suppose you could answer,
"It would take me forever to tell you, and I'm much too interested in what's happening now."
how is it possible that a being with such sensitive jewels as the eyes, such enchanted musical instruments as the ears, and such a fabulous arabesque of nerves as the brain, can experience itself as anything less than a god? And when you consider that this incalculably subtle organism is inseparable from the still more marvelous patterns of its environment, from the minutest electrical designs to the whole company of the galaxies, how is it conceivable that this incarnation of all eternity can be bored with being?
So, yeah, that's Alan Watts. Pretty inspiring stuff. So, this brings us to our last lesson that we can learn from drawing. No decision stands alone. So art can pretty well be boiled down to a series of decisions. And this point is not only about making sure that your decisions fit with one another, but also just recognizing the fact that every single time you make any mark, you are making a decision. And just like we don't want to draw on autopilot, we don't want to live life on autopilot either, because that's no fun. So drawing kind of helps us think about that. Whenever you go to the grocery store and you're in line and you're bored and annoyed with everybody, that is a decision that you're making. Just like whenever you wake up and go to your job, that's a decision that you're making. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre refers to this refusal to acknowledge the constant decisions that we're making as acting in bad faith. A great example of this is the fact that it's super duper easy every single time you're a little bit bored or tired to just pull out your phone and scroll on Instagram or Tumbles or the Snapper chats. It's a decision you're making, but it really doesn't feel like one. Like if we're on one of these infinite scrolling platforms, then every single time we swipe our thumbs down, we are making a decision to do that and making a decision to maybe go do something that might be a little bit more beneficial to us or might even be more relaxing. This brings us to the other part of No Decision Stands Alone, which has to do with the fact that every time we make a decision, not only are you choosing to do one thing, but you're simultaneously choosing not to do several other things. There are two sides to every line, and every line serves multiple purposes. If somebody's wearing a jacket, you're not only drawing the jacket itself, but you're also carving out the space around the jacket. That shape has to work on its own, but it also has to work with what's around it, and it also has to work in the larger composition in general. Maybe if you eat a giant delicious burrito full of beans and cheese, it might work really well in the moment and be super delicious, but it might not fit very well in the context of your day if you, say, have like a very important business opportunity or a work meeting coming up. The goal is to kind of create a harmony on both like a macro and a micro level and make sure that everything is working well together.
That time already? Well, I hope you've enjoyed the time that we spent together and maybe even given you a few things to think about both when drawing and living your day-to-day life. And I'll see you guys next time.